Hello YouTube, it's Lane here with Hobbies Man once again, and today we're going to be doing a recommendations video. Today we are going to be talking about books about dragons. Now, if you guys aren't unaware, August is also called Smaugust in some communities, mostly the art community, but I find the concept of Smaugust, a month about dragons, to be pretty fun and interesting. I've been watching Subjectively do a bunch of drawing videos for Smaugust, and I was interested in the idea of making a video about dragons as well. Now, I can't draw, and there really isn't anything collectible that is about dragons. I guess there's a lot of things in terms of like board games that are about dragons, but within the wheelhouse of my hobbies, which is mostly books and book-like things, like comic books, I think that the most interesting and most sensical thing to do a recommendations video about is books about dragons. So I have a few manga, a few novels that are all about dragons. So there's going to be some really obvious recommendations, and there's going to be some that are probably not going to be most people's cup of tea, and that's just how it is. I wanted to make this broad and encompassing so that anyone that watches this video might have something about it that they might find interesting. So I'm going to mention 8 things, and even though I'm going to mention them in a specific order, the order doesn't really matter. Any of these books are good. I just needed to write them in a certain way, and the way that came to mind was how I thought about them. So I thought about the first thing first and then the last thing last, and so that's why they're in that order. It's not a ranking or anything like that. It's just 8 different things that I recommend you read or watch or enjoy in some way if you like dragons. So starting off with the first one, I think it is probably the most interesting on the list, but it is not necessarily the best, and that would be Temeraire, or His Majesty's Dragon. This is a book series. It's written by Naomi Novik, who is quite well known for her, fairy tale reimagining, retelling stories, which would be Uprooted, and I can't remember the name of the second one, but those 2 novels, she's really well known for those, and Temeraire kind of falls to the wayside, but it's such a good book. So Temeraire, or the first one, is actually called His Majesty's Dragon, but the series is the Temeraire series, or the Dragon series. I can't remember what it's called, but it's by Naomi Novik. The first book looks like this, and it's really, really good. It follows this guy who is a captain on a Navy ship in the era right before Napoleon starts getting really serious about his war on Europe, right? So we follow this guy. I think his name was Lawrence. We follow him as he's the captain of this Navy ship, and eventually somehow ends up having a dragon egg. And this dragon hatches before they can get it to the correct group of people to take care of it, and it imprints on Lawrence, and it becomes his dragon. And now he has to leave the Navy and join the Dragon Corps to be a Dragon Corps, fighter instead of being a man of the Navy. And so it's a really interesting kind of concept, because this world is basically our world, but at some point dragons came up and people started using them as parts of their world, and they domesticated them in some senses, and they did a bunch of stuff to make them different types of dragons in order to have different things with them, right? And so they developed aerial technology and aerial warfare a lot faster than we did here in our version of the world. And that's because they can have dragons, right? So the thing is that Temeraire is a dragon that no one has seen before, at least no one in the Western side of things. And that's really where the interesting things happen, because Temeraire is significantly smarter than most dragons. He's a lot more individualistic than most dragons, and he has this kind of tendency to be really different from other people, but also really thoughtful, and it makes really compelling storytelling. And the character of the dragon is as much as a character as any human in the story, and it's really, really great. I really enjoy it. I read 4 volumes of the series really, really fast. I eventually did buy the 5th one, but I haven't really gotten back to the series. I think there's 9 books in total, and it's really, really good. They end up going all over the world as they kind of have this battle with Napoleon. And, they start in England because that's where the story starts, but then they end up in China at one point. They go to Turkey. They go to the south of Africa. I think they also end up in the Amazon at one point. They're all over the place. It's a very naval kind of story, but also a lot of interesting like early modern kind of stuff to it. It's really, really cool. I really, really recommend it. So, number 2 is Fairy Tail. Fairy Tail technically is not about dragons, but dragons play a huge part in the story. Most of the really important characters have Dragonslayer magic. They have the power to destroy these creatures. However, these creatures don't actually exist anymore, and the way that they've got their powers is actually part of the big mystery of the story and part of the really important development of the story throughout the whole running a Fairy Tail. It's 63 volumes. It's quite a long story. There's also a secondary story called 100 Years Quest, which is the continuation of the story. There's also a bunch of side stories for Fairy Tail, and they're all really good. I recommend you guys read the first series, just Fairy Tail, or you can watch it too since it's an anime, but I recommend you guys read just that. And if you're interested, follow up with Fairy Tail Zero, which is the prequel story. It tells you how Fairy Tail came to be, and it also gives you the story for Mavis Vermilion, who doesn't really come up in the story until about halfway through. So it's really interesting. Fairy Tail is great. There's a lot of dragons. Actually, there is quite a few fights with dragons eventually, but the story does take its time to get to that point, so be aware of that. But the main character is called the Salamander because he's a fire dragon slayer, and it's really, really cool. I like it a lot. It's also really well drawn, so that's really great. Then I have this book series that I can't remember the name of, but the first book is called Dragon Champion. It's written by E.E. Knight, and this is a book that I've never heard anyone else talk about, but it's a really enjoyable book. This one is medieval fantasy. It is very kind of classic Lord of the Rings style fantasy, but instead of following a farm boy that is secretly a very meaningful person in society, it follows a little dragon whose name is Aron, if I remember correctly, or Arun, I can't remember. But they follow this dragon as he hatches, fights off his brother, and becomes the champion of the clutch. Then his family gets attacked, and he has to leave and survive. And eventually in the first book, we follow his journey from hatching all the way to when he finally manages to become an adult and have his first relationship with another dragon. And then book 2 follows his sister. Book 3 follows a different dragon who happens to be his brother in a convoluted series of events. And then from there, I don't know what happens because I never read the rest of them. But Dragon Champion, the first book at least, is a great book. It has the whole life of an individual set up in this book. This individual happens to be a dragon. We get to see him as he grows up. We get to see him go from a little hatchling to a medium-sized drake, to a dragon, grow his wings, deal with the fact that his wings came in, and deal with the fact that now he is basically affecting other dragons with his presence. We get to see that he doesn't have scales, and so he has to learn how to deal with this and how it changes and actually gives him some benefits, even though it's very unlikely that it would seem useful. And we get to see a lot of great things. There's this really great world building in this world, and it's kind of a shame that it's kind of relegated to, clearance sales most of the time, because E.E. Knight, as far as I'm aware, is not a writer that most people really care about or really think about. I'm sure that, he's well liked by a certain group of people, but I don't know who that group of people is because I've never actually went out of my way to look for this creator's fans, because I don't really like anything they make besides the Dragon Champion series. So yeah, but the first book at least is wonderful. The second and third book are pretty interesting, but they kind of have the same formula, and so they feel a little bit samey, even though they're significantly different from the first one. But it's a great book. I definitely recommend it. That's another recommendation here for you guys. So next is Ragna Crimson. Now this is another manga. This also deals with dragon slayers, but this one is different because we follow this character who kind of has come back from the future, if I remember correctly, and then he realizes that something's going to happen that's going to ruin his life because of the way that he views this person that is going to be affected. And so he decides to grow stronger, and he grows so strong that he actually ends up killing dragons, and then he calls attention to himself, and this other person joins him, and then they go out killing dragons. It turns out that there's a very interesting mystery to to this other person that joins him. The main character's name is Ragna, and Crimson is the name of the other person, if I remember correctly. And they join forces to kill these dragons, and there's a really interesting dragon lore to this story. But I read the first 3 volumes. I thought they were good, but then I didn't really see myself buying more of them, so I sold them off, and I haven't gotten back to the story. But there's an anime for this story coming, and a lot of people really enjoy the story right now. So I definitely recommend it if you're interested in very battle-oriented dragon-type stuff. So there you go. It's also one of the few manga that really focuses on dragons. For some reason, dragons are just not that big of a deal in manga. So I don't know. It's just what it is, right? But it's really, really good. Number 5 is another novel, and this one is actually a harem-lit novel. So this one is a lot steamier, a lot smuttier than your usual novels that you're going to find. It's basically self-published. It's an indie kind of situation, and it's called Dragonslayer. It's by I can't remember his name. Let me remember. What's his name? Scott Earl, I think is his name. I don't know, but it looks like this, and it's a really good novel. It's pretty interesting. This creator actually writes a lot of these types of stories that are basically like isekai stories, but they don't really try to be isekais beyond the initial premise. They're mostly just male-oriented portal fantasy, and that's what I would really call them. And this one follows a guy who was a firefighter, then dies, gets summoned to this other world by this like Merlin creature, and then is given an amulet that contains the sultry voice of this evil witch, and then he is given some power, and he's told, go kill dragons and use your firefighting abilities to destroy these dragons and free this mythical land from their clutches. Turns out that he decides that he doesn't want to kill the dragons. He wants to, have sex with them, and and it's really ridiculous, but it works, and it's fun. The dragons can, of course, be human. They can turn into humans, like a lot of dragons can in a lot of fiction, and they all happen to be really hot women. And he manages to defeat them, and then they become part of his group, and then eventually, stuff happens in a very harem, manga-esque kind of way. And, stuff happens, and, he continues on the story. So it's really cool. I really enjoy it. It's a really fun story. I just like the way this author writes. I like the stuff that he writes as well. And I would really recommend any of his stories. Michael Scott Earl is a really good author, but this one is the only one that is directly about dragons. So this is the one that I'm recommending. He has one about dinosaurs and aliens. He has one about this were-tiger and this space vampire witch lady. He has one about these like space knights that are basically like Halo with a game system, which is really cool. Like Halo with medieval armor kind of type of stuff. There's also some other stories that he has that are all pretty good. I would recommend any of them, but for this specific video, I recommend Dragonslayer. Then there's this light novel called Dragon Hatchling, which is very similar to I'm a Spider, So What? It deals with this person that died. Doesn't really remember too much about how they died or why they died, but they are reborn as a creature, in this case a little dragon, and they decide that they're going to try their best to live their life. And so we follow this person who has a very funny voice, a very interesting and enjoyable way of expressing themselves as they detail their life, as they grow stronger, and eventually try to reach the goal of becoming human through the game system, which means that they eventually have to, gain levels in order to get the skill to allow them to transform into human or humanoid figures, and it's going to take a long time. But this first novel is pretty good. I really enjoy it. I think the art style is great, and it's just really cute and enjoyable. It kind of is just a slice of life, but you're following a creature instead of a person, and it's quite good. I would definitely say that Spider So What is a lot more enjoyable because Kumoko is a lot more feisty and kind of exciting to listen to, but the Dragon Hatchling is actually quite good as well. So I quite like both of these novels, but the one that fits the prompt here is, of course, Dragon Hatchling. So I definitely recommend you guys give it a go. Then number 7 is another manga. This one is Bestiarius. Now, the dragon isn't really a main character for the whole manga, but it is a main character for the first volume of the manga. Now, Bestiarius is not actually available in English, but I definitely recommend you guys check it out anyways, because drumming up support for this mangaka would actually help them get published in English. So Bestiarius, at least the first volume, follows these two characters. One is called Finn, and the other is called Durandal. Now, Durandal is a dragon, and this dragon was a dragon from the British Isles. Eventually, the Romans came about. They brought their Germanic slaves and their Germanic soldiers with them. They decided to kill all of Durandal's people, and they took him back to their Colosseum in order to have him, be a spectacle. Eventually, Durandal meets this boy Finn. Finn happens to be the son of the man that tried to kill Durandal, and Durandal decides to raise this boy as they both live at the Colosseum and are trying to basically live their life as well as they can while being gladiator slaves, right? And so eventually they manage to escape. They leave to the British Isles, and there they start this heroic fantasy kind of vibe to them, and they start appearing in other parts of the story as they help out a bunch of different characters. They help out this kid called Arthur and his buddies, Gawain and, whatever else the other characters in the Arthurian legend are called. They meet up with this other guy who also happens to be a heroic gladiator. And eventually they go head to head with some Roman legionnaires. And it's a really good story. I definitely recommend it. It's split up into 5 parts, if I remember correctly. Each one corresponding to a separate set of volumes within the story. And it's really, really good. The first volume and the last volume are probably my favorite ones just because they really involve Durandal and Finn. But, overall the story is really great and the art style is awesome. It's really, really good. And the last thing I have for you guys here today is Drifting Dragons, which is another manga, and this one also has an anime adaptation. So, half of the things you can read or watch, the other half you can just read or listen to if you like audiobooks. And Bestiarius is the only one that you can only read, right? So, yeah, Drifting Dragons is about these people that are basically analogous to whalers, and they're called drakers. And we follow basically all of the drakers that live on the Queen Zaza, which is a draking ship. Mostly we follow Takita, who is the newest person on the Queen Zaza, and Micah, who is the craziest person on the Queen Zaza. And we follow them as they go through their draking adventures. We see them fell these dragons and then consume them and eat them and enjoy this beautiful meat that they get out of these dragons. And we get to see a lot of very interesting world building and a lot of beautiful art. This is very great just for the art alone, but generally the story is just really enjoyable, really good, and I really recommend it. There really isn't too much to say because I don't really want to spoil anything, and also it's a lot more episodic than everything else I mentioned. So there really isn't like a major through line through every story. It is just generally we follow these people that are on this ship as they go through their lives, right? So yeah, those are 8 things that are about dragons that I recommend you guys read in the coming months. And this is kind of my video for Smaugust, even though Smaugust is mostly a writing and art kind of prompt. I still thought that it was interesting to kind of make a video about dragon recommendations. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please do like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.